we put great stock in flexibility. We're a flexible employer, and we believe your family is important. Okay, what does that look like day to day?
You were talking about like almost having actors that are taking part in this play, and there's bits of improvisation, but the reality is most people are following a pattern and they're following a process, and they've
Yes.
probably gone through some interview training.
There's sometimes these lies by omission where it's just not brought up, or the hiring manager may outright lie on that. Oh, no, the schedule is 8 to 5, when the reality is, well, I'm going to start pinging you at 6 a.m. and expect you to also answer an email at 10 p.m.
Robin, welcome. Pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Hello, Sam. It's lovely to be here.
Wonderful. For the listeners, please give us a bit of a background. Tell us about who you are, what you do, what you're interested in.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm Robin Schooling. I am currently with Humoriso. We are a HR and talent consulting firm. We do a lot of outsourcing, core HR, payroll, recruiting, talent strategy, all those sorts of things. And I am in my element because I am by trade, throughout my life, have been an HR and recruiting professional. That has been pretty much all I've done, in a variety of industries, variety of positions, variety of sized organizations. And I love to pontificate about some of the things that we do really well, and
Yeah.
some of the things where we could use a little bit of assistance, perhaps, in rethinking how we operate.
I love the diplomacy of assistance there.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that's definitely one of the themes which we were going to discuss today is like an area where people need assistance, or maybe like it's more like an area where we should just be honest with ourselves, and be honest with each other. And I love the kind of frame of honesty in recruiting. So yeah, tell us like high level, what you're thinking about there, and then let's dive in.
Yeah, it's not something new, and things surface every now and again where it brings it to the forefront in my mind. And there was a in the not too distant past, there were a bunch of articles written, in that, resume builder, did a survey and of hiring managers. This was end of last year, and they found that 40% of hiring managers admitted that they lie to candidates throughout the interview process. And I thought it was really an interesting twist to kind of call out the hiring managers on that, because it's real. Because so often we focus on, well, candidates are lying in the interview, and we kind of go down
Mm,
that path. How do we make sure people are telling us the truth? But it just really struck me, and has stuck with me these last couple of months, um, that this is just this ongoing issue. Everybody is dishonest in this interview and hiring process. And what do we do to fix it? Why are we like that? And I think I know why we're like that. And have some ideas on what we need to do to fix it as well, I guess.
And I think that when you think about honesty in general, actually, without an anonymous survey, how many people are honest about all of their interactions as a human being with other people?
Right.
It just day-to-day life. I'd love to see that statistic. And then your point on like what we do for candidates, you will look at remote proctoring, we'll look at verification processes, background checking, all of that piece. But actually,
Hmm.
where's the like open view into the hiring manager? I think really really fascinating
Yeah.
point. So why don't we start there? Why don't we start with hiring managers, and maybe go through the personas involved and this
Yeah.
circle and web of dishonesty potentially.
Yeah. Well, and I think to sort of lay the groundwork of getting to that understanding about it, whether from the hiring manager side or the candidate side, we have to realize that we've created this very artificial and weird and fake environment that people go through to get jobs. I mean, it's like we're all performing a play, and we kind of know our parts, and we've got these stock characters and sort of these stock lines that we use, and we're putting on this play.
Mm,
There's a little bit of improvisation, but we're going through the motions a lot with what we've created. So it's this weird environment where the expectation is that everyone's going to be on their best behavior, and
yeah.
and we always think about that for the candidates, but also for the hiring managers. The company, we do all the right things, right? Oh, well, we're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and craft this fantastic employer brand, and go through all the motions, and here we go, and these comms, and let's talk about our company, and let's be truthful and authentic, and put out this public face for our candidates. And then we get down to um, the actual process itself, and we've got hiring managers who are facing the need to staff up, and that may be someone who needs a one position, and it's a critical role on their team. That may be the hiring manager who it works in a very high turnover industry and is just constantly hiring, and they are faced with challenges on their labor budget because they can't keep staffed up, right? So they want to hire, they need to hire hundreds of people perhaps in their business unit. And so those hiring managers down at that grassroots level, and they're vetting candidates, and they're interviewing them, and they're skill testing them, whatever it might be, um, tend to sort of tell stories sometimes, because again, they want to put their best foot forward. So
Mm,
we run into a lot of that hiring manager may be um undoing all the good work that, again, this is going to be a large enterprise, right? Here's corporate TA, corporate HR, whomever, put together this fantastic story of the brand and the talent brand and what it's like to work here. And then that hiring manager is undoing all that good work. So things that they will lie about include what is the actual scope of the job.
mm,
What does the job really entail? There's the job posting, then there's the job description, and then somewhere in the middle is the reality of what
yeah.
the day to
Or,
day is.
or really far off to the left.
Right.
All right, yeah.
And so a candidate wants to know, what is my day to day going to be like? Um, and it's, yeah, tasks to be done, but it's also, what are the dynamics of the team? What is how much time am I spending in meetings versus how much time am I doing the work that I love and want to come in and do? What's the meeting culture of the organization? What's the company line? The sexy part that I read on the job description is um we put great stock in flexibility. We're a flexible employer, and we believe your family is important. Okay, what does that look like day to day? You can tell
Mm,
me that, but then my manager um, may have team norms of not approving time off or whatever it may look like. And so there's sometimes these lies by omission where it's just not brought up, or the hiring manager may outright lie on that. Oh, no, no, yeah, no, the schedule is 8 to 5, when the reality is, well, I'm going to start pinging you at 6 a.m. and expect you to also answer an email at 10 p.m. And they don't answer that. They lie about that, um,
mm.
because they want to fill that position, or they need to fill that position. So that's a very common hiring manager lie. Um,
And I think on that point, I love the bit when you were talking about like almost having actors that are taking part in this play, and there's bits of improvisation, but the reality is most people are following a pattern and they're following a process, and they've
Yes.
probably gone through some interview training. Like with interview tools, which are becoming, increasingly ever present
Yeah.
within organizations, plus standardization from AI, and, try not to bring AI into every podcast episode, but it's unavoidable at the moment, right?
Yep.
We've got more standardization coming. I think that challenge is going to be continuing, like perpetuate and
Yes.
be compounding in terms of people playing their role, playing their part. And it's difficult as well when you've been through training that tells you that you have to do this and you have to follow this process. And these are the
Right.
questions that you ask. And then in turn, it's like those stories that you're talking about where people get used to saying, right, well, this is my story for this part. When we talk about company culture, this is the example that I give, but it's not necessarily the lived example of what it's
Exactly.
actually like there, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And
And I think that that is probably the it's those kind of personal um experiences that if I'm a candidate and I'm sitting there interviewing with potentially my new manager, or maybe it's with other members of the team that I'll be working on, I want to know, that I'm making the right decision. I want those folks to be truthful with me. I want to really understand what it's going to be like day to day, beyond just
mm,
you're going to do this TPS report 3 times a week or whatever. And there's this hesitancy on the part of the company, whether that be the recruiter, the hiring manager, the coworkers who may be part of that interview team, uh, to just tell people the truth.
mm,
And I've seen it. I've employed the truth positively, um, and kind of got in trouble for it, but it was the best thing for the organization. um, because it's what the candidates needed, was the truth, and needed the
mm.
reality. Um, and because hiring people into something that's false is doing no one a service.
No, for sure. I think it's like that conscious deselection, isn't it? From a candidate's perspective, from a hiring manager's perspective of like, well, look, I mean, if you're honest with me and this is how you actually work, this is how I actually work, this is how it actually works, like
Right.
you might not want to be there. I think the challenge is that's a really great like people view of an org. I think
Yes.
sometimes you've got a talent acquisition person who's got, a requisition that needs to be filled, and they've got somebody who's got the right skills. And on the flip side, the hiring manager wants somebody in that position because it's critical and they meet all of the parts. And yeah, maybe there's a bit of bend and a bit of flex on the honesty, and it ends up happening. And then down the road, that bend, that flex, slowly until it cracks, right? And you then have that issue with tenure retention. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely it's a fine balance, isn't it, between it? But in a rose tinted world, maybe you're coming out of this with the right people in the right space. And what about on the other side? What about those TA? Let's bring them into it. Where do you see the lies there, or where do you see the dishonesty? Is probably the better
Yeah.
phrase.
I think some of the dishonesty coming early on in the process, right? Top of funnel, weeding through, trying to get this slate of candidates to get to the hiring manager. Um, and these are things that are just not true 99% of the time, right? Where a candidate wants to know, well, what's the pay going to be, right? And we act like that's so horrible. Everybody wants to know what they're going to be paid, we know
Yeah,
that, right? um and so there's this it's like sitting around with, I think of my grandparents that was all, don't talk about, money or anything, right? No, let's talk about money, right? It's top of mind. So we'll often have recruiters, very early on, often in that screening process, if they don't have to be transparent about it. Because certainly here in the States now, there are jurisdictions and states where it is, mandated now to list the hiring range. And it's a good
mm,
practice because you're letting the candidates know up front. but there are still recruiters, or even hiring managers further in the process, but recruiters who will say, well, what are you looking for? No, I don't have a hiring range. Oh, baloney. Yes,
Mm.
you have a hiring range. This position was
Yeah,
budgeted for. You may not have an official pay grade. Maybe you're a small organization. You have a hiring range, right? So just be honest with the candidate. Um, that's certainly at the front end. Uh, at the back end of the process, one of the most, overwrought, cliched lines that we have used forever is, here's the thanks but no thanks letter. Oh, thank you, Susie, for applying. We're not interested, but we'll keep your resume on file if
yeah,
something should come up.
yeah,
No, no, you won't. It's stored until you have, for record retention purposes. But we know that, there are lots of organizations that have thousands of candidates in their ATS, in their database,
mm,
and they're not fully tapping into that, certainly. So this lie of, oh, well, uh, to the candidate, it sounds like there's this magic drawer at the recruiter's desk that has a stack of resumes in it that they're going to look through every now and again,
yeah,
if something comes up. And it's pablum, and it sounds lovely, and it's, oh, they do care, and they let me down gently, they're going to keep me in mind. um and it's a lie, more often than not. um
yeah. And I think that's like 90% of, well, probably more, of all organizations, right, who will be guilty of not going back into their ATS, going back into this repository of people and
right.
reaching out to them first when a relevant position becomes available. And some of this data is 2 years old. And what's
Yeah.
that person's experience in the last 2 years anyway?
Yeah.
Like, how would you keep that up to date? Even if you had the best intentions, the practicality of it is just not there. And it's
Yeah.
like that, yeah, cheap breakup line, or that sort of, you bump into somebody in the street who you sort of know, loose acquaintance, you go, oh yeah, we must catch up, let's grab a coffee or a drink sometime.
Right.
Both parties full knowing that they're never going to message each other. Or you come to the end of a sales process, they say, yeah, check back in with us for the new financial year, it's probably a good time to connect. It's just being polite.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely like a disconnect there. And I think that's going to be one of the challenges, right? As you get the volume of applications continue to
Yes.
increase, with the availability of the big job platforms making it as seamless as possible to apply, and AI in the hands of candidates, right?
Yes.
Volumes are going to increase.
Yes.
Maybe these short messages, as polite as they are a good reflection, or possibly there's a different way of doing it. But yeah, I think that's yeah, a common pitfall.
Yeah.
I like it.
And where I've seen it turn, everyone you know um doesn't have these tools, right? But where that can shift the tide, if it's true, if it's real, right, is, if someone is using the power of their ATS, their CRM, to say, hey, we do have this, um, and we could debate community, the word community or not, but I'm going to use it right now. Here, we do have this talent community, right? Sign up, stay in touch. We'll communicate with you. There can be some truthfulness in that. We'll keep you in mind. It's really, you have to keep yourself in mind, but we
Yeah.
at least have a mechanism for you to do that.
And I suppose one of the arguments as well is, does it make you less attractive as a candidate? If you weren't a silver medalist, it's like, oh, this past applicant, they've been through 3 times. Like, if there's a
Right.
flag there, is there an unconscious bias? You're a new recruiter, your now managers rejected this candidate twice for that
Right.
position. Like, is there an unconscious bias there? Like, when we look into it, probably. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And what do you think, if we were to call out, because I think there's some great ones there at either end. Like, what about like that internal mechanism? Is there any, kind of areas for dishonesty there, areas for improvement for recruiters in that gap in between, that internal comms?
I think I think internally, um where we have the chance to improve the honesty is, and this is a very, typical sort of internal mobility sort of process, right, where oh, I'm over here on team A and I want to go over here and work on team B. I'm going to apply for that position. Um, and depending on how bureaucratic my organization is, that might take 55 steps of, approval to even apply, right? But let's
Yeah.
say I get over there, my application has been received by the team B hiring manager. And what happens with this alarming lack of transparency is the conversations going on behind the scenes. Here's this here's this employee who is interested, available, looking for a promotional opportunity or just a lateral move, whatever it may be, whatever the reason is. Um, they're invested in the company, they want to stay, they just want to try something new. And their existing manager, the potential new manager, maybe a lead, another, coworker, somebody in HR, they're all in there talking about should this person be considered before anybody's even talked to this person.
Yeah.
And so if finally that person does get in front of that team B hiring manager, goes through whatever that internal interview process looks like, then we get to the, well, we think we're not going to move them for whatever reason. And then we put the screen down again, and that employee does not get, if we owe doesn't get feedback, and if we owe truth and honesty and the chance to have some developmental conversations to anyone,
Mm.
it's certainly with our existing employees. And so often that doesn't happen. They're just sort of like, well, thanks, no, we're going with somebody else, and they're left wondering, and they're living in that environment day to day, and they can't even get an honest conversation because nobody wants to have it. Their existing manager's not interested in having it. HR, shouldn't be, but is not pushing it. And
Mm.
that hiring manager doesn't want to have that conversation. And so that's an organizational fail, um, that we really need to do better at.
Yeah, and I think the knock-on effects it could be huge, right? You've got somebody
Yeah.
that might want to leave for a particular reason. They've got that ambition. They might just go to another organization. They might be having problems with their existing team, and then their,
Yeah.
line manager is then aware of this. They've not achieved it. There's that flight risk. I mean, it's not too dissimilar to saying, "Oh, like I'm looking for another position at another organization. Oh, I failed the interview. I'll be back in on Monday. My ambition and hunger and energy and everything is still the same. It's just the reality is it will take a
Yep.
while to rebuild that trust, to rebuild that buy-in, and you've got this person, on your books, on your team, and for the individual you're on the books on the team, it becomes a real challenging cycle. So
Yes.
no, I think it's a great one to call out, and it's a part where a lot of organisations are investing in that internal mobility piece. But actually, then what's the pathway? And like you say, this is why you weren't successful. Here's some resources on how you can be
Yep.
successful. This is why somebody else was. These are the steps you can take to get there, and it doesn't mean any animosity from where you are.
Exactly.
But it's tough though, isn't it? It's tough.
Hmm.
It's like, you've got a friend in your personal life and they've got a trait and it's known to everyone around them. And sometimes it takes somebody brave to just say, you should probably stop doing that.
Exactly.
It's
Your own worst enemy
intervention.
or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And not everyone takes feedback well, right? So, yeah, it's definitely, yeah, definitely a challenge. And if you're working in an office environment, you've got to walk past them every single day,
Yes.
and you're on a different team, and like, yeah, it's not an easy one to manage for everyone. So, I can see how it can happen, but it's definitely one to avoid. And what
Yeah.
about candidates then? External candidates, like I think that's a fascinating one, right? Because this is where a lot of the, like you said right at
Hmm.
the beginning, this is where a lot of the lights are focused on.
Hmm.
Um, where are the issues? What's the problem? Is this person who they say they are, etc. But yeah, I would love
Yeah.
to get your take on it.
And again, we often get a lot of, we hear about this a lot more so than the hiring managers, right? Oh, the candidate, they don't have the experience that they say did, right? Um, so again, I think we have to go back to this fact that we've created this really artificial be on stage sort of moment around what is it like to look for a job, and what are we doing, right? So candidates are faced with, um, create this, have this up to date resume CV, and it should be loaded with all the keywords and format it this way. There's a $1 billion industry, right, for people to write resumes, and format resumes for people. Load it with the keywords. So adjust it each time you're applying for a job. Make sure those keywords are in there. There's all that advice. So candidates are doing that. They may or may not have to have a cover letter. There's another topic of conversation. Personally, I love cover letters, but um, so they might have to have a cover letter at the ready as well. Um, and so they're juggling all these bits and pieces to put together what is essentially this these marketing documents, because that resume slash cover letter that's just to get eyeballs on me, and hopefully get me in the door to start the process. And so there's a lot of time spent on that, and so people will put themselves forward in what they think is the best light. And so are there embellished resumes? You bet there are. Have I probably embellished mine over the years? You bet I have.
Yeah.
um, and so people will change their job titles, or add a little extra time at a position. So dates are often not 100% accurate, or titles not accurate, or scope of what I did, um, either day-to-day responsibilities or the span of control that I had, right? So people will,
Mm.
to put themselves in. I always think people are coming from a good place of intention, right? I really need a job. I kind of did this. I'm going to just make it sound better, right? And so
Yeah.
you got that. Now you have, this is this is one of the silliest sort of arguments I've watched unfold lately. Is uh, not so much hiring managers, but HRTA folks arguing about, um, well, if somebody's writing their cover letter using Chat GPT, um, aren't they? They're kind of making that up. I don't know if I should accept that. I mean, come on, really? Um, People have been paying people to write their resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn profiles, whatever, forever. And now you're going to be upset that somebody's using a tool to help them kind of, do an
Mm.
outline of something. So we get incensed over really these stupid things that candidates are doing, because the reality is sometimes people just need a job. And what is wrong with that, right? And we more hoops that we've created. So candidates will embellish. Um, and it's often a title, right? I might be called a, customer service supervisor level 4 is my essential, official title. But on my resume, that means nothing. So I'm going to put customer service, specialist and admin or something, right? So I'm
Mm.
lying right there using a title that's different. Candidates will, not so much in the submission process, but once they get through the interview, well, why did you leave a job?
Mm.
Will often not tell the truth. But again, because we've built this world where if they tell the truth, it is often viewed as a negative. And why should that be?
Mm.
Well, why did you leave that job? And I might use better words, but I had an asshole boss. It was a toxic work environment. They paid me well below market. I needed more money because I have to support my family, put a roof over my head, whatever. What's wrong with that?
Mm.
None of those are bad reasons. And so candidates will not necessarily be truthful in the interview process because they don't want to seem like, oh, I can't get along with anybody, so I can't talk about this toxic work environment. So I'm gonna dance around it. Or maybe I was terminated or asked to leave. But boy, unless they really ask me that point blank, I am going to dance around that and not say I was terminated.
Mm.
Um,
And
And
it goes back to that system, that process, just to jump in. It's like, again, it's your play actors in this scenario. Like this whole world has been built where you know that you need to say X or you need to
yeah,
say Y at these certain points of the process. And there's some parts where we've got to reflect as well. And I think that point on the, a chat GPT generated resume or, cover letter.
yeah,
Again, what are we going to say? People should be handwriting because
right,
some people are using an advantage because they've got technology in their hands
right,
to create a Word document. This person's formatting is different, etc. Like I think actually what it does is it helps with standardization. It helps bring people that maybe don't have those skills up to the level of other people.
right,
And you still have to add your own color and depth to it. And I think that point on the keywords piece, that like embellishment, sometimes it's just balance as well. We see that a lot
exactly,
when we think about, full stack developers. Whether are they working front end, are they working back end? Well, guess what? If somebody really wants a back end engineer, they're probably more weighted towards that.
right,
And if they want a front end engineer, guess what? They're probably more weighted towards
right,
that. And I think that balance is there. And again, it's systemic because your LinkedIn profile tells you to add certain keywords to be more visible. You know that you need to add keywords to get past the ATS stages. Like the competition is more fierce, not
yep,
even like depending on the labor market shift.
yep,
Competition is more fierce because people have got broader access to jobs and it is easier to do so at pace. So yeah, I think all of those things, it's like, actually, is it dishonesty or is it just more like you say, like I'm trying to get a job and I know that I need to jump through these extra
hmm,
hoops. And maybe that realness, comes through later on. And like,
hmm,
yeah, I jumped in there as you were kind of going through the journey, but I think, yeah, what about in the kind of that next phase as they're moving beyond the submission, like the
yeah.
creation, that engagement?
I think it's again, that submission piece is that's getting me in the door, right? Somebody's actually looked at my CV, looked at my online profile, whatever it may be, wants to start engaging with me. When we get to that interview process, whether that's with TA, whether that's I'm moving along, I'm in front of the hiring manager. Um, Here's where I have hope, right? In that, no, my job is not going anywhere. Um, because there it will always be that need and that time for human intervention as we
Yeah,
as we
yeah.
go along the process. And so it's having um it's having people who are trained interviewers, who can pick up on cues, who can ask the right questions, who can maybe start with a script, right, of questions they want to ask, but are able to pick up on cues and maybe take the conversation in another direction as needed. So when I have someone sitting in front of me and they um have listed a certain skill set, right? And maybe I haven't done an assessment or I don't have anything that's necessarily verifying that. I'm going off straight conversation with someone. I have to be prepared to validate that through their knowledge really through that conversation. And so I need to kind
Mm,
of have been trained as an interviewer to do that, right? And so it's getting through, well, when did you do XYZ maneuver type of thing? Let's walk through a
yeah.
situation where you did it, right? And you're kind of getting those examples. So it's using that. Um it's also, and this becomes part of the training that's key, I think, for the interviewers. It's finding ways to elicit that negative information, that truth, without
Mm,
judgment. Um, and so, we're very good at kind of a common question. Tell me, oh, you worked at Acme Corporation. What did you like about your role as accounting manager at Acme Corporation? What did you like about it, right? And the person has something prepared, right? So oh, I was in charge of this and that and the other thing, and I love the company, blah, blah, blah. It's okay then to ask a negative question and elicit negative information. Hey, that's great. Glad you liked working at Acme Corporation. But you know what? We all have had jobs where things weren't quite so great. Tell me about a job that you had that, what was the job? Um, Tell me about that job that caused you frustration or where things weren't
mm,
what you anticipated them to be. And and you're bonding really with the candidate, but you've also by that hopefully you've created a safe space for them to tell you that, and you listen to their answers, and you don't judge, and you're making it okay for them to share that with you, because you've said, I've worked at places where it wasn't all sunshine and roses. Have you? Tell me about one of them.
Yeah.
And so it's flexing your muscles as an interviewer, um, to have those conversations and kind of elicit information about some of those, even those softer things, right? I think when we get to skills and determining if somebody's got the meat of that skill, you know, that is one place where certainly the using assessments, I mean, the stuff you all do, right? There's these, I can upskill myself and I can sort of test my knowledge, and as a hiring manager, I can put stock in an assessment that's been done and that sort of thing from a skill level, certainly. And then I can dive into the, okay, well, let's talk about that skill. And when you put it into use, there's where the interview takes place.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, that there are areas where you can just be objective, and there are other
Right.
areas, right? If you're looking for clear talent, or if you're looking for people that have a particular qualification, like there are things which are just
Yep.
definite and finite and objective. And
Yep.
then that kind of subjectivity, that is the role of the human being. And I think it's so essential, right, as we're in those conversations, to be able to just speak to somebody and say, do you know what? Look, I've looked at your profile. It doesn't really matter, like almost, that you may or may not have done this to that depth.
Yep.
Like, I just want your honest feedback on what it was like and what the scope of your role actually was. Is the job title reflective of
Yep.
what you were doing? And I think that's one of the biggest issues as well is, job titles between organizations meaning different things.
Exactly.
And people get their back up because somebody's got a more senior job title than them in the process, or a more junior job title, where actually the scope of work within your organization means they're probably 3 or 4 rows below,
Right.
where they are on their resume, right? So yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And so human conversation is certainly one way of fixing it. Kind of objective
Mhm.
testing, something that is just finite. Where else do you see this across like each one of those personas or actors? Let's call them actors,
Yeah,
in
they are
this process, because I think it's a wonderful framing, right? We're all actors in life, is another way of looking at it, right? There's societal pressures that mean that we act in a certain
Mhm.
way, and we cue where, um, everything, right? Everything
Yeah.
we do is some way, we're actors. But beyond that, like for each one of them, where do you see, like, how can we fix this? How can we make
Yeah.
this better?
I think, I think there are, at the end of the day, this is not necessarily something at scale. It's almost like person by person, right? Where if I'm going to be in this role, I'm going to vow to do this different. I think on the candidate side, who actually have the hardest challenge, right? If I'm suddenly unemployed, or I'm just absolutely miserable at a toxic job and I need to get out, right? I am, I need to work, right? And I need to find a job. That's probably the hardest actor to sort of change the trajectory, because there's these forces at play, right? That are hard. But I would say for the candidates, it's, probably the key things: don't change, don't lie about dates of employment. Don't lie about those. They are what they are. That's probably one of the easiest things to be verified, that an employer will do, at time of offer. So don't lie about, dates of employment. Titles, to our point, they are what they are. Again, I have no problem with a resume being what it should be. This marketing document. But when you get to the point where you're doing an application, where you're attesting this is
Mm,
true, that needs to be truthful in terms of what I've done, where I've done it, for how long I've done it. That's the verifiable stuff that will either get you not hired or terminated. Um,
yeah.
so yes, you're marketing yourself, but when it comes to kind of those nuts and bolts, be honest, be real. Um, for TA recruiters, um, it is it is not being swayed by the need to hit some arbitrarily devised metrics from the corporate office, um, around let's we need to hire X number of people, or time to fill needs to be this, so just hustle, hustle, hustle. Because recruiters in a high volume environment certainly can get into this. Oh, like, just, it's all hit the numbers, get a body type of thing. um it still is about getting the right people, and getting the right people in front of your hiring manager, uh,
Mm,
and hiring managers, right? So don't lie to candidates, ta. Yes, there may be this sort of corporate, and again, I'm talking large enterprise, right? But here's our vision of who we are, what we do. Here's our brand. If you're small, a mid-sized organization, you have a lot more flexibility with that. So I had an HR team once, so we had, we did it all, right? Soup to nuts HR, a lot of recruiting, high volume recruiting as well. And so the our recruiting team, we decided, this is where I did get in trouble, but I said, no, this is the way it is. Because the powers that be didn't like this messaging. But we had this very high turnover industry, very arbitrary, HR is responsible for turnover, all this kind of stuff. Well, we were hiring, when I walked in there, we'd been hiring the wrong people. And it was
mm,
under this sort of false brand that was out there of what the job was and what the company was. Well, I wasn't going to necessarily turn it into a negative, although there were lots of negatives, but turned it into truthfulness. And so we changed our messaging to candidates, because the reality was people were not going to come and stay forever. It was not that type of job, not that type of industry. If we could get 6 to 12 months out of somebody, because we had a lot of transient sort of students and whatnot, that was great, and
yeah.
made our money. The ROI was there. So we changed our messaging and started to say to candidates, we understand this is probably not your forever job, but this is a great way for you to start in this industry or growing these skills. And we can provide you those opportunities, and there may be some transfer chances. Everything was true, honest, but we didn't lead out the gate with, oh, we want you to come and be here forever, because that was not
Mm,
real. um and so tar need to think reality, and find ways to do that that still fits in with what the business needs are. And then I think on the hiring manager side, the role that they have to play, what they need to think about is, again, being honest with the candidates. It's not just, I need to fill that seat because the rest of my team are burned out from working overtime. It's, am I bringing someone in who's the right person for my team, for that role? And what's going to be important to them is going to be this nebulous stuff. And it might be organizational stuff that as a manager, I have no control over, but I need to be real about that and tell people about that. Yeah, I know at corporate they told you our bonus is, the bonus structure is XYZ. Um, here's how it here's how it really works, right? I mean, it could even be something like that. um so that hiring manager needs to remember it's a two-way street as well, and tell that candidate, I'm even a fan of saying, Sally on our team is a challenge for all of us to work with, and you're going to have to work really hard with her, or really, work a lot with her. Um,
yeah.
but don't worry, I'll help you, um, navigate that relationship. I mean, stuff like that.
Mm, mm. And I think it's almost like drawing back the curtain, isn't it? And just because the conscious deselection is so important. I think in
Right,
each one of those examples, it's like for both sides, like if this just isn't going to work, let's find out now. Like
right,
let's not find out after 3, 6, 9 months of pain,
right.
or you end up in a scenario where the pressures are on you from the outside. And 2 years you spend with somebody, 40, 50 hours a week that you just don't enjoy working with,
Yep.
like you may as well be upfront about that and
Yep.
and get that out of the way.
Yep.
So yeah, I think really, really practical. I think one final question from me as we come towards the kind of end is actually, what's your view on TA metrics? Because you were saying about arbitrary TA
Right.
metrics, potentially unsettling this type of conversation, unsettling like the truthfulness that can happen within the process and pushing people to do things
Yeah.
that might not be right for the business. Like, do you think TA metrics matter? If so, like, are there any which you would call out, or
I,
like, what do you think really matters?
I think they matter, and the ones that matter to me, I think, more than others, are um, what I would call the efficiency metrics. Right. I want to know internally to TA, internally to HR, and I want my leadership team to know this as well. I want to know the efficiency metrics of our processes, because that's going to help me tell the story of, do I, where can I streamline things? Where do I maybe need to get some technology in to do some of this heavy lifting, right? So the metrics that I like, that I really think are important, are things like, time. I don't even want to say time to fill, because there's so many variables in that. I like time and stage, right?
Mm,
Because if I can track, here's a sourced candidate or an inbound candidate, whatever it might be, I want that clock to start ticking, because I want to see how my process is working to move that candidate along, and then where the bottlenecks are. So I like to kind of take a look at time and stage. I think tells a much better story than just time to fill. Um, Time to fill may work. Sometimes it is an organizational thing as well.
mm,
If I'm hiring very uniquely skilled positions, where the reality is it is a challenge to source somebody because it's so unique. And then I have to do the dance and the courtship and the whatever. Yeah, that time to fill might be 6, 8 months. And that might be
yeah,
okay for that role, that organization. So the metrics become very organizationally specific. I like the operational ones. Where I get upset is when TA or HR are given um, responsibility for things that are not in their control, such as turnover, such as I've seen HR teams or TA teams even get saddled with employee satisfaction, employee engagement type scores. That
mm,
is not my, um, while I may be an architect of some of the things that are driving engagement or turnover, I don't own the turnover in HR just because I'm tracking the numbers and looking at retention and whatnot. And so sometimes these metrics are given, handed down, without any real thought of what they mean or any definition of what that looks like in the organization, and who should have responsibility or ownership of, improving a score like
mm,
that. Because it's people don't leave jobs because the recruiter 12 months ago did something. People leave jobs because of the job or the manager or the organization. It's not TA that's led
yeah.
somebody to leave a job 12 months from now.
Yeah, and I think ownership is the key there, and because I think maybe where sometimes TA is guilty is taking ownership for a metric within the organization that they've positively impacted through this great process, through these
Yeah.
great individuals, etc. And actually, in turn, it's all of those other variable things which have come into play to impact that metric. And
Yep.
it's the same in reverse. When the metric is
Yep.
poor, people are looking for an area to put the focus on, and if that ownership isn't set out from the start, then
Yep.
you're just passing it around and shining the spotlight wherever, until somebody's not strong enough to battle it back, and it ends up being that area that needs the restructure, the reorg, the
Mhm.
refocus, retraining, etc. So no, fascinating, and I think thank you for joining today.
Thank you.
It's not short to say an industry legend. It's a phrase too easily thrown around, but not in your case, and I'm sure anyone can attest to that who's met you and listened. And yeah, an expert conversationalist as ever, on your own stuff. And thanks for joining here. So yeah, pleasure to have you on.